But that's what's awesome about my guest today is she has kind of expanded my mind and allowed me to think about candy in a whole new way. And that, yeah, it's a fun, enjoyable thing that kids eat a lot, but the science behind it is truly incredible. Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and when I typically think of the word scientist and chef, candy is not like the next word that pops into my head. But that's what's awesome about my guest today is she has kind of expanded my mind and allowed me to think about candy in a whole new way. And that, yeah, it's a fun, enjoyable thing that kids eat a lot, but the science behind it is truly incredible. To tell us all about that is the owner of Sprink, a modern candy science company right here in Omaha. Tessa Porter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so let's just start off from a high level. What is a candy scientist? What do you guys do at Sprink?
Yeah, so a candy scientist is a scientist that works with candy, as simple as that may sound, but we get down into the nitty-gritty molecular level of what's happening inside of the candies that we eat. And how I describe it when I do like some classroom interactions is as you go through the grocery store and walk in the candy aisle, or any aisle for that matter, there is a person and a team of people that created all of those items and developed those. And just like making stuff in the kitchen, you're developing formula or recipes, we're developing formulas to make those products be food safe, shelf stable, and for, some luck, I ended up in the candy industry and specifically focus on confectionery technology and candy science.
Okay, so to help people understand what candy science is and some of the things that you guys are thinking about in the lab, I went through, you actually have done a really cool thing on Sprink's Instagram, and you've listed a bunch of like candy facts throughout the years. So I've got a couple questions for you based off of those. First one, can you break down the difference in gummies that are made with gelatin, pectin, and starch?
Oh, this is a perfect question to like lean into candy science.
Let's tee it up.
So we do formulations and chemistry of candy, and we're using different ingredients that have different functions. So when we talk about gummies, the most traditional gummy is your classic gummy bear. It is a gelatin-based gummy, and gelatin is what Jell-O is made out of. It is bouncy, it is chewy, it is a protein derived from animal material. And that gives us our classic gummy. We put these materials of gelatin, pectin, starch into the category of hydrocolloids. Now, hydrocolloids are things that go into solution. They're giving us the texture of our gummies. Gelatin being the most classic. We also do pectin, and pectin is derived from apples or citrus, and pectin is like what you would think of jams and jellies use pectin. There's a whole chemistry portfolio of pectins. They're not all equal, but pectin gives us a very short texture. When I say short, like it's not bouncy, it's more brittle, and it gives us kind of a clean, fresh texture to a gummy. A good example of this, if I don't know if they're around anymore, but the most classic example of a pectin gummy is Sun-Kissed fruit gems. Do you remember those? They were individual gumdrops that were like individually packaged. Another good one is Annie's Fruit Snacks is a pectin
these
base.
Things. Yes, these were awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
those
man.
And so
I haven't seen one of those on forever.
That's a very classic pectin jelly. The generations before me in candy science would say they're not all gummies. Some of them are jellies. Some of them are gummies. We've kind of lumped them all into gummies now. And then we have other things like starches. If you think of like your Scooby-Doo fruit snacks, those are starch-based gummies. A lot of this craze with the Swedish gummies, those are starch-based. And so not all gummies are equal. There's a variety of textures, and that group of hydrocolloids is really what determines what that texture is going to be.
And you guys thought candy was easy. There's so much that goes into it, and it's amazing because, like, if I thought of like a gummy bear and one of those Scooby-Doo gummies you were talking about, I would do exactly what you just said. I would lump them into the same category. But when you start talking about how they're different, I can think in my head, like, the chewing experience is different.
Yeah.
Like, the texture, the mouthfeel is very different in those two products, even though we call them both gummies.
Yeah. And then you have combinations of all of those. So if I knew you were going to ask this question, I would have brought like a toolbox of all of these gummies so we could taste them. But yeah, your classic gelatin only, you have a pectin only, like I said, with those fruit gems or Annie's fruit snacks, and then your starch. And within those categories, there's multiple gelatins that can be used, different gel strengths. There are different pectins that can be used that give you kind of a portfolio of textures. And then there's a really wide portfolio of starches, from cornstarch being the most traditional to tapioca starch, potato starch, pea starch, rice starch. All of them function similar, but very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we can start making combinations of starches and gelatin and pectin. So for example, like Norma's is a gelatin and pectin combination. That's one of my more favorite combinations to work with. So you'll see that like reoccurs a lot in products that we create. But like we can just take those levers of those hydrocolloids along with all the other levers of what else is in there, but create and dial in really unique and specific textures.
Here's the fact that blew me away, or I guess I'm going to ask a question based off this fact. There's one main difference between marshmallows and gummy bears.
Yeah.
What is it?
Air. That's air.
Wild.
It's free. Yeah, so that's one of the coolest things to do is you can take gelatin-based, they have to be gelatin-based gummies, and melt them down and put them in your KitchenAid mixer with a whisk attachment or a Hobart bowl and whip air into them, and it makes marshmallows. Marshmallows are not exactly the same, but very similar composition to gummy bears, traditional gummy bears.
That is, when I read that, I was like, there's no way that's true. But then I was like, I'm not going to doubt these people. They're scientists. I accept whatever you say.
So fun fact, I have another candy scientist friend in the industry who's now, she creates social content for brands. And she took that fact and then created a whole series on Instagram of Will It Mallow, taking different candies and melting them down. So shout out to Hannah at One Sweet Mama, where she did the Will It Mallow series on social media. It's really cool to see.
Okay, might have to check that out after this. Obviously, we've got an assortment of products up here. These are things that Sprinkk creates. I kind of want to get into the two sides of Sprinkk, because there's... Actually, I'll just let you describe. What are the two sides of Sprinkk?
Yeah, so there's the development side of Sprinkk and there's the manufacturing side of Sprinkk. And then I'll call it like the third side of it, I guess, of the branded side that we're slowly creating now. But as Sprinkk started back in 2019, 2020, we started as just development. I was a consultant in the industry doing product development for other brands, new brands starting up, big brands that already existed and were creating new things or optimizing their manufacturing facilities. And I would write formulations for these folks or go into their facility and work on the scale-up process with them. And so the core of the business of Sprinkk right now is still development and consulting. And so we have our lab here in Omaha where we do formula creation. We test out different ingredients. We make prototypes on a small scale, which then leads into a little bit of process design of how does this need to be cooked up? How does it need to be formed? What equipment is going to be needed? And then one of the main reasons that Sprinkk exists is the second side of the business, which is the manufacturing side. And this all stems from within the industry making candy, specifically making gummies. The factories are very large and, it's such a commodity product, has been such a commodity product in the past. It's becoming more of a gourmet product and unique product now. But in the past, gummies were penny candy, cheap candy. And in order to make that viable for a business, you have to run a lot of it. So we're talking order quantities of 50,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds. This equipment is very, very big. In order to even turn it on, your minimum is maybe 10,000 pounds just to get to get the equipment running. And so that fact really was creating a roadblock to innovation, because if you have to run 100,000 pounds of something, or 50,000, even 50, think 50,000 pounds of something, and you don't know for sure that it's going to work, the risk is really pretty high to create something new. And so it just wasn't happening. We would see in the industry, innovation was really different flavors, different colors, different shapes, but creating a whole new texture of a product, or heaven forbid, a whole new type of product, like it's not a gummy, it's not a chew, it's not a hard candy. What is it? Creating something that unique, there was nowhere to do it. And so I know there's a lot of brilliant scientists out here in R&D teams that have these ideas that just go nowhere. And so the mission of Sprink, outside of development and having that core of the business, was to create a playground for these ideas to come to life. And so we've built a small manufacturing facility, which for those that are in the industry, it would be comparable to a pilot plant, but it is set up and certified as a fully functioning manufacturing facility. And it is small then that we can run small tests and try out different things. That way, when we make messes, because you always make messes in development, it's on, it's maybe 100-pound mess, not a 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 pound mess. And so it brings down the costs of innovation, that we can try more things out faster on a smaller scale. And then being a manufacturer for manufacturers, then we help our clients scale into larger manufacturing facilities. So it's a gap that we're filling in a very niche world of candy innovation. And those are the two main points, or two main sides of Sprink and what we do. And then as now we have the development and the manufacturing capabilities in-house, why not create our own products? So that has become the third side of Sprink, where we now have the Husker gummies as a brand under Sprink.
Okay, well, I want to go back to that innovation portion, because I think that's like, it's such an interesting niche. I know words that you fill, because before we talked about this, when I came and visited the lab, I'd never really thought about, hey, yeah, we really don't see a lot of innovation in candy. It's usually, it's, Hershey's coming out with cookies and cream, or, just a new flavor, or, there's peach gummy bears or something now. But it's not, very rarely, do you go to the checkout lane at the grocery store or whatever and be like, oh, that's something totally new. What does that process look like? Like, do brands come to you and say, hey, we've got this idea, we don't know if it's going to work, but we'd love for you to test it? Or do you see someone else's product and do you go to them and be like, hey, have you ever thought about X? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it happens both ways. Sometimes we get, comes from more of like a marketing and analyst side, where they've dug through the data in Amazon, or saying like, hey, this type of product is performing well, what can we create that aligns with that? Or gummies have taken off in the last 15 years, 10 really the last 10 years, but 10, 15 years, gummies have just skyrocketed in the market. What is the next gummy? Everyone wants to know what's going to be the next gummy. What is the next category that's going to take off like this? We saw the growth of chewy candy in general, and then it just really, I don't know who's eating all the gummies in the world, but people make a lot of gummies. People sell a lot of gummies. And so the question is, what is the next gummy? What is the next opportunity? And so we're always trying to think of that, of like, okay, what's the next texture that we can create? And then on the other side of that, I do walk through the stores sometimes and I'll find products where I'm like, oh, this is cool, but like, could be cooler. And sometimes I do reach out to them, or if I see a quality issue, if they're like some formulas of gummies get really sticky, and I'm not afraid to reach out to those brands and say, hey, I think we maybe can help you out, or I saw this product on the shelf, and as a founder of a brand, I want people to tell me if they see something that's maybe a little off with the product. And so I reach out to brands as well, not so much as to gain business, but to also just help them out. And, if there's something wrong with their product, I think that they probably want to know.
Yes, good companies and people should want honest feedback if it's helpful. And coming from a fellow candy scientist, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes it develops into some work, but more often than not, it's just, thanks for the feedback. We'll look into it.
So I don't know if you're allowed to name names or specific products or anything, but when you think about the brands that you've helped, what is like one of your favorite success stories that Sprink has helped a major brand with?
I have a lot, and some of my favorites are the smaller brands because it's more, there's more excitement around it. There's more grit involved, it's more personal. So I really like working with the smaller brands. And I like to talk about the key moments of joy that we create at Sprink, because if you think of like, Dan, if you were creating a product, you've been dreaming about this for years of like, oh man, if only this would exist. I have a good example of two of them that we helped out with recently of, they're not in they're women, they're not in the candy industry, and they had an idea and we helped them develop it. And there's a key moment in our process when we create the first prototype of something that they've been dreaming of, and they get to hold it and try it and taste it for the first time. That's really cool. Usually they've done some tinkering in their kitchen first, but to show them like this is what like a commercially viable version of your idea looks like. And so them seeing it come to life from the lab prototype is that first key moment that I just really cherish getting to share with someone. And on a larger scale, like for bigger brands that we work with, like that just kind of gets lost. We get excited about it, but they're focusing more on numbers. And so that element of joy is a little bit dampened there. But the second key moment that I like, which we do often share with bigger brands, is that scale up of once we run the first production run and you get to see this thing that was once an idea or a dream actually running at hundreds of pounds at a time, or in our facility, maybe tens of pounds at a time, but getting to see that produce for the first time. And so we have a brand that we launched with, it's a mother. She was, staying at home with her kids, and she just had her fourth kid, but she created a brand targeted towards pregnant women that has ginger in it for, nausea. But it's really a candy. It's not meant to be a supplement. It's not meant to be a medicine. It is really just a delicious candy. And we eat it all the time. It's one of my favorite formulas. But that was a really fun one to get to develop. It's called Yum Mums, and it's for sale online. And then we've done some work with big brands. We do work with big brands as well because we get to function as their pilot plant in a facility, where they're not making messes in a larger facility. And I can't name names on this one, but last year we did a very large brand launched a gummy, and we helped them through that development phase. And what was really cool is we made 26 different versions of it within 1 week in our facility. So then they were able to take that and put it into consumer testing. So they had their taste tester pool set up and took these 26 different versions to testing to then get really good feedback before they scaled up into the actual manufacturing facility, which is much larger than we are. But because of our size and our flexibility, we were able to do something that no other facility that I'm aware of could do, which helped them dial in their product qualities right away from the beginning. Instead of launching, getting feedback of like, oh, we wish this was more sour, or we wish this was more firm. We were able to create all of those iterations. They went out to consumer testing. They dialed down what that formula should be, and then we helped them scale it up.
Wonderful. Do you have like a dream candy in mind that you haven't been able to quite figure out yet, or you'd love to do it just when you have the time, but like a candy or a gummy that you would love to create?
I have so many ideas.
What's your favorite one?
So I think that Norma's Peach White Mulberry it's
wonderful.
It is that dream that has come to life recently. I grew up, I grew up in Albion, which is a small town about 2 hours from here, and I grew up always in the mulberry tree in June. So like June comes, the mulberries are ripe, and I was always in mulberry trees. And once I got into the candy industry and started to play around with product development, I just thought that would be such a cool thing to incorporate mulberries into a gummy someday. I've been thinking about this for like a decade and never really had the opportunity to do it. And mulberries aren't a big commercially available crop, especially around. It's a weed. And so finding a source of mulberries and someplace to even put it and a brand to launch it under, that never really lined up until now when we had Norma's. And being able to do the peach, it is a white mulberry so that it's not dark purple like our other SKUs, but being able to do that has been like a dream of mine of like, what if we did this? And it is different than a normal gummy processing. So we do cook Norma's product under vacuum, which is a unique process in gummy manufacturing, that by pulling vacuum, you can boil off the water from the process at a much lower temperature, which allows us to maintain the integrity of the fruit and the honey that's in there and keeps it a more light and fresh tasting product instead of a really cooked, jammy type taste.
Wow.
So I could nerd out about vacuum cooking, but
I love it. My dream someday, and I don't even know if this is feasible because I'm not a scientist, but my favorite flavor combination is mint and chocolate. And if you think about all the chocolate mint products out there, and there are so many, and I like a lot of them, it's chocolate first and then mint in the center. Mm-hmm. I want a mint-covered chocolate. I don't even know how that would work. Maybe it's just the ratios need to be more mint and less chocolate, so the chocolate's still on the outside, but that is my dream someday because I'm a sucker for mint. So I'm probably like one of 6 people on the planet who wants this product, so it will never be made. But that's my goal.
I think we could do it. You could do like the Cadbury candy coated eggs, like where it's like chocolate, or just like an M&M type product. You could make a really strong mint coating on the outside of like a chocolate lentil.
Look at that. You just solved it within 8 seconds.
Call M&M Mars. have them make a mint M&M, with the mint in the outside. I
would buy those by the truckload.
Yeah.
Again, probably one of 6 people who would do so. But.
No, I really like mint too. I think a mint. So my favorite candy is Tootsie Rolls, and I think a mint Tootsie, like a classic Tootsie Roll, like it still has to be the chocolate, but with mint.
Oh, that sounds incredible! Right? That chewiness.
Yeah.
This has to happen. Tootsie Roll, come to Sprink. Let's innovate this thing. Let's get it into life here.
Add some mint to that.
Yes. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you've helped other brands, and you love seeing that aha moment for them where they get to see their idea live.
Yeah.
Tell me about these, because these are your ideas. These are the things that you've had in your head. I know Norma's, that's your grandma. It's her syrup recipe that she used to make that is the base of these gummies. What is it like for you to be able to bring these to life?
Oh, this has been, it's been a dream. It really has. Being able to play with things. I think that Sprink is what 10-year-old Tessa dreamt of but never knew could be a real thing. Like being able to just like play in the kitchen and create these things and like create them, having the capability and the know-how around formulation now to create them as viable products. Like it's so cool. I am still amazed that I get to do this and like build a business around it, because like with Norma's, for example, that was again, it was never intended to be a thing. I never planned on launching my own brand. But when I started Sprink, and that also was when the pandemic hit. I started Sprink, then the pandemic hit. And my grandma Norma reached out to me asking if I could help her put her elderberry syrup, which she was making quite a bit of at the time for, helping to boost immunity. I'm not going to make any claims about health around these, but, she was making elderberry syrup that had honey and cinnamon and some other spices and ginger, and elderberries. And she was, handing that out to her friends. She was handing it out to my family, to just take this and help your immunity, in this time when everyone's trying to stay healthy. And she was thinking, my grandma's also a creator and a tinkerer and has been for years. She's like, well, what if we put this into like a gummy bear? Could we do that? So she played around with it in her kitchen a little bit and made some like little Jello shot type, products with adding, gelatin to it to make Jello with this elderberry. But of course, it wasn't quite shelf stable. So I took her syrup, the basis of her syrup recipe, and transformed that into what we now have as the fruit snack. And it just, I still didn't anticipate it becoming a thing. I was just making these for her to hand out to friends and family, maybe sell at a farmer's market in town. And at the same time, I was connected with a brand strategist on a completely different product. And she was just really interested in what I was always doing, of like, oh, what are you tinkering with in the kitchen today? And I happened to be working on Norma's. I told her about it. And she said, did you ever consider making this into a brand? Like, your story has been handed to you. Like, we get paid to create these stories and make these stories up around like, the backstory of a brand. And she's like, here it is, just organically happening. So can we create this into a brand? And, I'm like, yeah, sure, if you want to. And they created the most beautiful branding, and I had never gone through this before of like, what is the tone of the brand and the voice of the brand, and what's the story that we tell? And that story was all rooted in real life, in the true history and lifestyle of Grandma Norma, combined with, the science of what I brought to the table, and that combination. And that's where the brand came about. And so that led into, now we have this brand, and they were connected with a graphic designer that was like, oh, this is a great brand idea. Let me create some graphics around it. He created the most beautiful graphics that we have. Like, it all just fell into place. And so I just kind of like try to stay out of the way and let it happen, and keep, kind of push it along when I need to. But so we did the elderberry ginger fruit snack, which then also the formula, being able to create it under vacuum, have real honey in it, have real fruits, have real spices. Like, that was just something that I always thought would be a cool formula to have. It's something that on a large scale, in a big brand, we've, as a developer, I'd always want to create these things for these brands, but it's too expensive. The ingredients are hard to find in large quantities. So it never really made sense on a large scale. But here I have the opportunity to just do it, and do it on a small scale, and formulate it however I want. And so we did that one. The texture turned out really cool, kind of like a Welch's fruit snack, but it is gelatin and pectin based. And then it happened to be rhubarb season when I was working on it, and I love strawberry rhubarb pie. So I went out to the garden and I picked some rhubarb, boiled it down, put that into kind of a similar base formula along with some strawberry juice, still has honey, still has cinnamon, and made a strawberry rhubarb version of the same texture. So it's kind of my play on strawberry rhubarb pie in a fruit snack.
I love that you started breaking this down, but I'd love for you to go a little bit further, because, when we see gummies in the aisle, it's usually the same flavors. It's cherry and watermelon and lemon, and maybe they're covered in sour sugar crystals, whatever it might be, but it's basically the same 7 or 8 flavors. You're not seeing elderberry. You're not seeing mulberries. You're not seeing things like that. And I think you started to get into this just with your background and the things that you like, but what made you go in that direction where you're like, I'm not just going to do standard flavors, but with my signature texture, but I'm going to do some really creative flavors as well.
Yeah, I think that's how it started, was with the elderberry ginger. So that's where it was all rooted. And then the strawberry rhubarb was really just me playing around with something that I thought would be cool. And so with Norma's, we've never aimed to target the masses. And the masses are buying cherry, orange, strawberry, grape, lemon, watermelon, which are great flavors. But that's why you see those in everything in larger brands, because that's what people are buying. Being something small here, part of me feels like it's maybe a selfish thing as to why our flavors are unique, is because I wanted them to be, and they're things that I like. And so having that unique flavor of strawberry rhubarb, it just felt really rooted in the Midwest. And if we're going to build this brand that is rooted in the Midwest and hyper local, using local ingredients wherever we can, why not? Why not do strawberry rhubarb? It's still strawberry, it's still familiar, but with a hint of rhubarb. Same with, peach. Peach is a very popular flavor, but peach white mulberry. That's where I got to bring in, my love of mulberries and tie that in of like, it's familiar enough that people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, I don't know about that. Probably aren't going to buy it. It's familiar enough to draw them in and then introduce something new to them. So people are familiar with peach. People may not be familiar with white mulberry, but peach will draw them in, and hopefully the white mulberry keeps them coming back.
Now, these are absolutely fantastic. I'm not a huge candy person, so I'm usually have a pretty iron will when it comes to not overeating candy. If you put a bag of those in front of me, I'll just like absent-mindedly go through the whole thing, and then I meant to have 4, and all of a sudden the entire bag's gone. So people, check those out. Where can they be found? So
Norma's are for sale at normas.com, but they're also for sale in town here at a few places locally. Made in Omaha sells them. Godega sells them. Sorry, I should have had a list, but you can also look at normas.com. We now have a map on our website of where to buy, and you can check out all of the local shops that have them.
I found a quote from you in Omaha magazine from a couple years ago where you said, even as a kid, I always had this urge to make things out of nothing, whether crafting, cooking, or building. Where does that desire come from?
I don't know. I think it's inherited. Like I said, my grandma was a creator and a tinkerer. My dad is a mason and he's currently building a new house for he and my mom, and doing all of it himself. And so I think it's just in my nature to be a creator and be very curious and try things out. But yeah, I remember it was almost like an urge when I was little. I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, I just want to create something. Like, I need to cook something or build something. And so I think my parents were always on the lookout for what sort of mess I was about to make, of like trying something out. And my mom can tell stories of that, of me trying things out in the kitchen, and she keeps a very clean home. So I was always like dancing around her to try to, not have her avoid me making a mess and, cleaning up behind myself. But yeah, I've always had this urge of like, I just want to like create something. And then once I get an idea of something, I have a really hard time letting it go. Some ideas go pretty quickly, but if that idea comes back multiple times, especially over years, like I have some ideas like Norma's kind of, played around for a little while. But once I have an idea, and if it comes back year after year and like it won't go away, it's like, okay, like I need to do this. Like I am meant to bring this thing to life, whatever it may be. And, I talk about that too with, like, just in general, not candy focused specifically, but like, I think that all people have really good ideas, and how we bring those ideas from just something that's in our head to something that is real and actionable. I think that paying attention to something that, like, if it comes to you time and time again, like maybe just the first step, I think, is like talking to someone of like, hey, like, I really think I want to do this, and just like get that wheel going, because there are people out there that want to help new things come to life. And I know we've built a whole company around like helping people bring those ideas to life.
So you prominently worked at, I mean, you've worked at many places, but Hershey's is one of the big ones, and the Ferrera Candy Company in Chicago is the other big one, where you were on the teams that helped develop Black Forest Gummies and Nerds Gummy Clusters.
I can't get away from that one.
Well, what do you mean?
No, it's just like one of them. It's the top-selling candy right now. Like Nerds Gummy Clusters has surpassed Skittles, and it's just such a good product. And the team there has done a phenomenal job of growing that and marketing that, and making enough nerds to coat that. I know that was a big thing, but yeah, I've worked with a lot of different companies. I really got my foundation in confections at the Hershey company. I was an intern there a couple of times and had a tremendous mentor while I was there, that taught me the fundamentals of confectionery science. And it was at the time, I felt like it was the most boring internship possible, because he had this old textbook of candy technology, and we went through it chapter by chapter. I would read a chapter, I would ask him questions, and then we would make something in the lab based off of that chapter. And that was an experience that, like, at the time, thought, like, man, like, snooze fest. But everything that I've built off of, like, everything that where my career has succeeded was built off of that knowledge that I gained there. And so I'm really, really grateful for that time that I had at Hershey, where I had the opportunity to work with this gentleman named Mark Heim. He was a fellow scientist at Hershey, incredibly knowledgeable about all things candy technology. And he just downloaded as much of that information into me as he could. So that was a really pivotal point in my career, was working at Hershey and gaining that knowledge. And they were always very encouraging of try something, just try it. He would trick us in ways. There were a few others in our group, and he would trick us in ways of adding an ingredient when we weren't paying attention, and then having us figure out what happened, what would cause this issue to happen, and troubleshooting in reverse. And so that was, the Hershey was really foundational to my career in that way. And, got to work on some cool brands and see some cool manufacturing of these very legacy products. And then my career really was built then at Ferrera. I started as a food scientist. I grew up, within the company through mergers and acquisitions, and eventually was the head of innovation when I took off to start Sprink. And yeah, that last project was Nerds Gummy Clusters was in motion as I was there. I will never claim to be the creator. It's always a team of people that create it. And, there was a gentleman on my team that was leading the pilot trials and the prototyping in the lab. But it's always a group effort to create something that big. There's engineers and there's marketing, and it all has to come together in the right time, in the right place, to be something that big.
Well, hopefully Norma's continues to blow up, and that can be your legacy, and the Nerds Gummy Clusters doesn't have to follow you around anymore someday.
Yeah, I mean, and Nerds is that's something that everyone knows, right? Mm-hmm. And it's such a big product, and being able to be connected to that has been very beneficial for me in recognition. But I hope that Norma's grows up at a sustainable pace.
Maybe we don't want it to blow up.
Yeah, we don't need it to be that big, but just at a sustainable pace that we can, keep up with and produce the produce for. That's another fun part of the Norma's brand, is that we've planted a rhubarb farm to support it, and we've been grafting white mulberry trees. So I've got a whole background and stories around that as well. I'm becoming a farmer.
Something you probably never would have imagined when you got into candy.
No.
So your career in 2019, you are the chief of... Let me make sure. Head of innovation and technology at a giant candy company in Chicago. I imagine this is a dream job for you that you'd been chasing for most of your career. And yet you left and came back to Omaha. Why?
Because what if I didn't? And that thought always sat with me of what if I think I have, well, I don't think, I know I have a fear of regret and thinking, what if I could have stayed in Chicago in that role? And I loved it. It was a dream job. It was very hard to leave. And but it was also a corporate job. It was something, you're working for someone else, you're, working off of someone else's ideas. And I always had more ideas in my head and always thought of what if we could do this? What if, and I never wanted to, work my way through that and think back of, I always had this idea of Sprink or something like Sprink, and, I never acted on it. I wonder what life would have been like if I tried it. And so I think that was a really big driver. But also family is a really big driver. I was in Chicago, and my siblings were having kids, and I like being a candy scientist, but I love being an aunt. And so being close to home was important for me, and maybe not all the way back into Albion, but being close to family was always important. And so that was a big driver too. And there was I was thinking of this last night as I was kind of thinking about like, what questions is he going to ask? And there was also an element, and she doesn't know I'm going to say this, but years ago I was in Chicago, and there was an article in the Omaha magazine about Katina Talley. And Katina Talley is a few years behind me as a food science student at the University of Nebraska. And she was, as you know, she was a food scientist, and then she started the bakery and
Sweet Magnolia's Bake Shop and No Good. Just in case someone isn't familiar with her name, you should be, but if you're not, that's what Katina owns.
So I remember reading that article that she started Sweet Magnolia's, and I'm like, wow, that's like really cool. And I think there was part of me that didn't, you get on a path. There was a part of me of like, here's the path that I'm on. And that article about Katina opened up the idea, like maybe it just put the crack in, opened up the idea of you can change and you could create a whole new business. She was on the path of being a food scientist, in a corporation.
She was at Conagra.
Yeah, so she was
very successful.
And to step aside and create your own lane was something that I just hadn't thought of yet at that point. But that article about Katina opened up that thought a little bit of like, hey, what if you did just, like you're running a race on a track and you just like step aside because you don't have to keep going in this direction just because that's the path that you're on. It can turn, you can step off, you can create your own lane. And so that then, and this was years of contemplation of where things were going to go. But that, kind of was an opening. And then, my siblings having kids and wanting to be home to be an aunt, and, and then identifying the gap in the industry of like innovation is in a very small box. How do we open up that box? Like all of these things kind of led together of like, move to Omaha and make this happen. Otherwise, you're going to regret it.
You talked earlier about how the ideas that you listen to are the ones that keep coming back into your brain. You are a wildly creative person. You're very forward thinking. So I imagine even as you're working in this dream job at Ferrara, you're having other ideas of where I could work, what I could create, what I could do. And you get this idea, even if it was nebulous at the beginning, for Sprink. What was it about that idea that made it kept coming back into your head until you finally said, this sounds crazy, but I gotta act on it?
It was years of thinking about it and talking about it. In 2015... 2015 into 2016, I started to think about, what else, like here's the path I'm on. Here's what my, growth trajectory looks like within this company. And I progressed very quickly. Like I reached what I thought was my dream job. My goal career was, when I graduated from college and got my master's, was I want to lead R&D for a large candy company, a large non-chocolate candy company. And I met that goal at 26. And so I was like, okay, like
that's awesome.
Maybe
that's a lot of life left to live.
Maybe I'm made for more. And so like, well, what's next? And yeah, so I started to think about that and talk about it with, mentors within the industry of, what are the needs? What are your pain points? I watched some of my mentors within the candy industry go from being directors of innovation to being consultants, or retiring and becoming consultants. And, there was part of me of like, maybe I'll just become a consultant. But that conversation felt incredibly rude for me, like to talk with these experts where I'm trying to soak up their knowledge. And for me to say oh, I'm going to be a consultant, like that just felt ridiculous. Like, who do you think you are, Tessa, to be one of these, experienced people in the industry when you're so inexperienced. And so that made me start to think of okay, I can't do that because there's people out there that are far better at this than I am. Mm-hmm. And come to find out, we all have our different skill sets, and one of mine is in consulting and formulation. And I was maybe underselling myself a little bit at that time, but that led me to talk to them about, okay, well, I don't want to be another one of the same consultants, because I don't feel like I qualify for that. What can I do to support you? What are your pain points in your business that I can fit a business into? And that helped to identify the scale-up process of, my friends who were the consultants made formulas in their kitchens, they wrote the formulations, but then getting them into manufacturing was a really big jump. The same thing that we saw within, a multi-billion-dollar company of we have a development lab and we have manufacturing lines. It's a big jump to get there. And so they weren't able to innovate new things. If they created something new, there was no place to take it. So what if I created the place for them to take it? And so that's where it really started to dial in of what Sprinkk was going to be. So really, Sprinkk wasn't just created by me. It was kind of created by the whole industry and their guidance towards what is the need.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're getting a little low on time, but I got to give you an opportunity to talk about Husker Gummies, because I know this is something that you're really excited about. What are Husker Gummies, and what makes you so passionate about them?
Yeah, so Husker Gummies are the first brand under Sprinkk that we are producing ourselves and selling. It is a gummy formula that we've been working on creating for years to really get the texture just right. It is a nod towards the texture of Albanese, but with a little bit more chewiness of like Haribo or Black Forest. But it is really just something that we wanted to be a really nice, smooth, chewy texture. And then the whole Husker part of it, like getting the license and being able to have this full circle moment of bringing candy to Nebraska as Sprink and then manufacturing Husker licensed candy. It's just really cool. It's really cool to be able to bring that home and create that and celebrate Nebraska and like Husker culture and around quality and sharing. So it's made, it's in a share size pack, whether you eat it yourself or not. It's in a share size pack meant to be like for gatherings, like tailgates and sharing and like creating moments of just like good Nebraska pride.
Okay. We've done a lot of talking about the past and how Sprink came to be, but obviously from talking with you, you're someone who's always thinking ahead. You have ideas on ideas on ideas. When you look into the future, what do you see for Sprink?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many ideas, but really it is to, we've built the foundation of Sprink as a developer or as a development lab and manufacturing, but to really continue to just perfect that and build out that process. Building a manufacturing facility is its own conversation too. It's hard. It's hard to build a factory from the ground up. And we're still working out, what do those processes look like? What does the workflow look like? Making sure that our quality systems are in place. Like we have a tiny little factory, but it is fully SQF certified for food and dietary supplements, which SQF is a food safety certification. It's not just, under the FDA, like we go the extra mile to make sure that we have third-party certification around it, and just all of the systems that go into place of creating a factory of that level. It's a lot. And so we've created the foundation of it. The future for the next few years is perfecting that and becoming more efficient and working in different types of manufacturing. We have some cool projects upcoming that are not gummies, that are really, really neat and serving the market of creators to be able to do those types of products. So we've got some cool things happening there, and maybe more products, but really just becoming a true expert in development, creating new things, and manufacturing.
Well, I mean, that's exciting to think about more stuff coming down the road, but the current status is also pretty stinking delicious right now. I mean, you're looking in front of us, Husker gummies, Normas, you've got Brick, the sleep gummies. Yeah. What's the brand that you developed with the Potash twins?
So Sweet Stash.
Sweet
Stash is the brand started by the Potash twins, and it's just a delicious gummy. Like it's not frilly. There's not, anything. It's not super low sugar. It is just a quality, good gummy. And so we've partnered with them and, worked on the development and the initial manufacturing with them. I'm excited to see new products there. And then Brick, so I mentioned that we're certified for food and supplements. Brick is one of the first supplements that we've produced out of our facility, which is a brand owned by my husband, Scott. Mm-hmm. And so we've been producing Brick sleep gummies out of our facility as well. And so we hope to grow there as also in doing more supplement development.
Okay, people. You have plenty of ways to experience Sprink. You don't have to be somebody who's trying to invent a new candy, although if you are, Tessa would love to talk with you. But get out and try these. Like I said, these are seriously addicting. They are very good gummies, and I can't wait to see the products that you continue to come out with, even just the flavors of Norma's, because like that peach one, that's unlike anything I've ever tasted in a very good way. So, Tessa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This was a pleasure to get to meet you and we could have talked so much more, but to get to hear a very small part of your story, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for the invite. And anytime you want to chat about candy science facts, we can dig into it.
I love it. Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.